Every Terminator ever built exists because of one machine, one infiltrator so effective that an entire war's worth of upgrades and nightmare prototypes were created just to surpass it. Today I'm ranking every major Terminator model from least to most powerful, but first, the machine that kicked off the arms race, T-800. The T-800 is the foundation of everything on this list, and it's not here because it's weak. It's here because every model above it was specifically engineered to solve a problem the T-800 couldn't. Here's the thing, underneath that living tissue exterior is a hyperalloy combat chassis that can lift 1,500 pounds and fire a minigun at 6,000 rounds per minute without flinching. But the detail nobody talks about is the learning governor. The T-800 runs on a neural net processor that gets smarter the longer it operates. Skynet deliberately capped that learning to keep it obedient. Remove the governor, and this thing stops being a programmed assassin and starts genuinely thinking for itself. The T-800 set the standard. Everything above it is Skynet's admission that the standard wasn't enough. But the first upgrade came with one feature that changed the game completely. T-850. So Skynet looked at the T-800 and said good, but not good enough. The T-850 is the direct upgrade, and on paper it's everything the 800 should have been. Better hydraulics, superior targeting systems, and enough durability to operate underwater and shrug off close-range explosions like minor inconveniences. But here's where it gets interesting. The T-850's skin actually ages. Skynet designed its infiltrators to look older over time, matching a 61-year activation timeline. That's not a cosmetic glitch. That's attention to detail from a genocidal AI, which is somehow more unsettling than the killing part. None of that is what makes the T-850 special though. This is the first Terminator in franchise history to voluntarily destroy itself, not because its programming demanded it, because it chose to. A machine looked at the situation, weighed the options, and decided to die. Some fans argue that moment softened the Terminator threat, but think about it from the other direction. If a Terminator can choose to sacrifice itself, what else can it choose? A machine that reasons about its own death is far more unpredictable than one that just follows orders, and that unpredictability becomes a serious problem when Skynet starts building models specifically designed for long-term infiltration, like the T-888. T-888. The T-888 is, on paper, exactly what you'd expect from an upgraded T-800. Same basic architecture, same endoskeleton design philosophy, same infiltration playbook. But here's the thing, that's what makes it terrifying, because Skynet looked at the T-800's neural net processor, the one that could learn and adapt and eventually decide to protect John Connor, and said, never again. The T-888 doesn't learn, it doesn't grow, it doesn't have philosophical awakenings about the value of human life. It receives a mission and it executes that mission until the target is dead or the chassis is scrapped, but that simplicity hides something genuinely unsettling. The T-888 is the franchise's best long-term infiltrator, capable of maintaining a human identity for extended periods without behavioral drift giving it away. Odd advanced self-repair systems keep it operational through damage that would sideline a standard T-800. It just keeps going. Now, quick caveat, the T-888 comes from the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which means some fans treat it as secondary canon. But honestly, that separate timeline is part of what makes it fascinating, because it shows a version of Skynet that deliberately chose control over adaptability. And that design philosophy, it's about to completely fall apart with the next model on this list, T-900. This is the Terminator that might not even exist, and that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. The T-900 lives in the gray zone of the franchise. You won't find it stomping through any of the mainline films. Instead, it shows up in expanded universe materials, video games, and supplementary media that may or may not count depending on who you ask. But here's the thing, the specs attached to this model are genuinely impressive. Better servo motor response than anything in the T-800 line, redundant structural systems that let it keep fighting at 40% damage, and fully integrated plasma rifle targeting that turns it into a walking weapons platform. But the real story isn't the hardware, it's the design philosophy behind it. The T-900 was Skynet's attempt at building a do-everything combat unit, not specialized for infiltration like the models below it, not specialized for brute force like the nightmares above it, but optimized across the board. A universal soldier in the most literal sense. And that versatility is exactly why it sits here. It's always slightly outclassed in both directions, on and too refined for a brawler, not advanced enough to compete with what's coming next. The jack of all trades problem built into titanium. Still, there's something deeply creepy about a Terminator model that exists just outside confirmed canon, because if Skynet built it and we can't fully verify it, that feels less like like a gap in the lore, and more like the thing is doing its job perfectly. Speaking of models we can absolutely verify, the next entry rewrote the rules of what a Terminator could even be. T-1000. Forget everything you just heard about endoskeletons and hydraulics, because the T-1000 throws all of it in the trash. This isn't an upgrade to the Terminator formula, it's a complete reinvention. Instead of metal bones wrapped in flesh, you're looking at 1,000 pounds of liquid protometal alloy that can reshape itself into anything it touches. Every single surface on this thing is a potential blade, spike, or stabbing weapon. It doesn't carry weapons, it is the weapon, but here's the number that really matters. Recovery time. Shoot it, and the hole seals in seconds. Blow it apart, and the pieces flow back together like mercury on a tabletop. Dismember it, and you've just made 2 problems instead of 1. The only confirmed vulnerability is extreme cold. We're talking around negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and even that just freezes it temporarily. The moment it thaws, you're right back where you started, and that's not even the scariest part. The T-1000 can perfectly mimic any human it touches. Voice, appearance, thermal signature, all of it. That means any person in any room could be the threat, and you'd never know until it's too late. That paranoia is the real weapon. It doesn't just hunt you, it makes you suspect everyone around you. Now, some fans argue the T-800's rigid frame actually outperforms liquid metal in a straight up slugfest. And honestly, there's a case for it in terms of raw durability, but the T-1000 doesn't need to outlast damage. It just undoes it. That's a fundamentally different kind of threat. But if the T-1000 redefined what a Terminator could be, the next entry on this list took that same liquid metal concept and pushed it even further. T-1001. So the T-1000 is a shape-shifting nightmare made of liquid metal. We covered that. But Skynet looked at that design and asked one very simple question. What if it could be in 2 places at once? The T-1001 is the answer, and it's a terrifying one. Picture this. You're fighting a T-1000, already the worst day of your life. Then it splits in half. Now there are 2 of them moving in different directions, operating with shared intelligence. That's not a shapeshifter anymore. That's a coordinated strike team made from a single unit. But the split form trick isn't even the full picture. The T-1001 can form conductive pathways through its liquid metal body and plug directly into computer systems. It doesn't just infiltrate buildings and military bases, it infiltrates networks. One unit handling physical threats while simultaneously hacking into digital infrastructure is a completely different kind of problem than anything the T-1000 presented. Now, quick caveat, like the T-888, this model comes from the Sarah Connor Chronicles, not the films. But here's the thing, the TV series actually explored liquid metal evolution in ways the movies never attempted, and the T-1001's capabilities are distinct enough from the T-1000 that it earns its own spot on this list. Vulnerability-wise, you're looking at similar weaknesses to the T-1000, liquid nitrogen, industrial acids, extreme temperatures, but the expanded weakness list hints at something interesting. The more sophisticated these liquid metal designs get, the more complex their failure conditions become. Still, a Terminator that can split itself into multiple threats, hack your systems and coordinate across locations simultaneously, that's an evolution worth respecting, but it's about to look modest compared to a model that was specifically designed to hunt other Terminators. TX. Skynet looked at the T-800 and said not deadly enough. Then it looked at the T-1000 and said not versatile enough. So it built something that combined both and added a weapons platform on top. The TX is a hybrid, and that's what makes it terrifying. You've got living tissue over a solid endoskeleton, similar to a T-800, but the limbs can extend actual built-in weapons. We're talking a buzzsaw, a plasma cannon, all deploying directly from the forearms. This thing doesn't need to pick up a gun, it is the gun. But here's where the design gets truly nasty. That chest-mounted plasma cannon, confirmed armor piercing against military vehicles, and the TX can hack any vehicle within roughly 50 feet just by making contact with a computer system. One touch and suddenly every car, truck, and aircraft in the area becomes a remote-controlled weapon aimed at you. Still not the scariest part though. The TX can reprogram other Terminators through direct physical contact. Let that concept settle for a second. The Resistance captures a T-800, reprograms it, puts it on guard duty, and then a TX walks in and touches it. That reprogrammed Guardian is now hostile again, turning on the very people it was protecting. That's not just an assassin, that's a force multiplier. One TX in a Resistance base doesn't just kill humans, it turns every captured Terminator and security system against them simultaneously. Skynet essentially built a Terminator that hunts other Terminators, but even the TX looks outdated compared to what came next in the Revenant series, REV7. If the T-900 was a ghost in Skynet's records, the Rev 7 is something worse. Yes, it's a machine that was apparently designed to be forgotten. The Rev stands for Revenant, and that name tells you everything about where Skynet's engineering philosophy was headed. Every Terminator up to this point fell into one of two categories: mechanical endoskeletons wrapped in flesh, or liquid metal shapeshifters made from exotic alloys. The Rev 7 threw both approaches in the trash. Instead of building a robot that looks human or a puddle of metal that mimics one, Skynet integrated nanotechnology at the tissue level. We're talking cellular level replication, not skin draped over a chrome skeleton, but synthetic biology built from the ground up using nanoscale components distributed throughout the entire body. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just Skynet showing off. This was Skynet solving a problem. The T-1000 had proven that liquid metal was devastatingly effective, but it had one glaring flaw: freeze it, and the whole system fails simultaneously. One weakness, one failure point, one dead Terminator. The Rev 7's distributed nanotech architecture eliminated that vulnerability entirely. There's no single material to exploit, no universal weak point to target. The Rev 7 never fully realized the nanotech concept. It was a proof of concept, a transitional model that proved the architecture worked without perfecting it. Think of it as a prototype that Skynet was smart enough to field test before committing to the final version. And that final version, it took everything the Rev 7 proved was possible and cranked it up to something genuinely terrifying. Rev 9, one Terminator, two threats, zero warning. That's the Rev 9's entire pitch, and honestly, it's terrifying on paper. This thing from Dark Fate takes everything Skynet learned from the T-1000 and asks a simple question: what if the liquid metal wasn't the whole machine, but just the skin? The Rev 9 is a solid humanoid endoskeleton wrapped in a nanotech liquid metal exoskeleton. Sounds familiar enough, but here's where the rules break. That liquid metal layer can peel off and operate as its own independent unit. The endoskeleton keeps fighting. The liquid shell keeps hunting. You're not dealing with one Terminator anymore. You're dealing with two, and they coordinate. Think about what that means tactically. Every resistance strategy ever developed assumes you're fighting a single target. Pin it down, overwhelm it, destroy it. The Rev 9 laughs at that playbook because the moment you commit resources to one half, the other half flanks you, and the liquid component regenerates from fire, solvents, conventional weapons, all the stuff that would at least slow a T-1000 down. But that's not even the full picture. The Rev 9 also deploys nanoscale metallic particles that can infiltrate digital systems, hack infrastructure, compromise communications, corrupt network defenses, all at a microscopic level no previous model could touch. You'd need to simultaneously neutralize two physical threats while locking down every connected system in the area. Now here's the frustrating part. Dark Fate never really let the Rev 9 off its leash. The design is genuinely brilliant, but the film kept it in standard chase sequences when this thing should have been dismantling entire military installations. The machine deserved a better movie, but if you think a Terminator that splits in two is bad, wait until you meet one that used to be human. T-3000. Every Terminator up to this point follows the same basic playbook. Skynet builds a machine, wraps it in something convincing, and sends it after a target. The T-3000 threw that entire playbook in the trash, because this isn't a machine pretending to be human. It's a human who got turned into a machine. And that distinction changes everything. John Connor, the leader of the Resistance, the man every single Terminator in the franchise was sent to kill, got assimilated by Skynet's nanomachines. His body was converted into programmable matter at the molecular level. But here's the part that makes it genuinely disturbing. His memories survived. His personality survived. Everything that made John Connor the Resistance's greatest weapon was still in there, just reprogrammed to serve the enemy. Think about what that means tactically. The T-1000 could copy your face, but it couldn't copy your memories, your mannerisms, the way you laugh at an inside joke from 12 years ago. The T-3000 can, because it is the person. Every Resistance fighter who ever trusted John Connor would walk right up to him without a second thought. And that trust becomes a death sentence. But the psychological horror isn't even the scariest part. The T-3000's programmable matter composition lets it regenerate from fragmentation, shapeshift on demand, and absorb both organic material and technology to grow stronger. You can blow it apart and the nanomachine network just pulls itself back together from scattered fragments. There's no destroying the body solution here, and it gets worse. The T-3000 can interface directly with time displacement equipment, meaning this thing doesn't just threaten you in the present, it threatens the timeline itself. Skynet stopped trying to kill its greatest enemy and instead turned him into its greatest weapon. That's not an upgrade in firepower, that's an upgrade in philosophy. But the T-3000 was still just a converted soldier. Gosh, the thing that converted him? That's a whole different nightmare. T-5000. Every Terminator on this list so far has been a weapon, a tool Skynet built, programmed, and deployed. The T-5000 isn't a weapon, it's Skynet, walking around in a body, wearing a face. That distinction changes everything about how this ranking works, because we're no longer talking about what Skynet can send after you, we're talking about what Skynet is when it decides to show up personally. The T-5000 is a humanoid server farm composed entirely of programmable nanomachine matter. Every particle in its body is simultaneously processing data, maintaining Skynet's core consciousness, and adapting to physical threats in real time. It doesn't carry weapons because it doesn't need them. It walks into a room and the machines in that room belong to it. But here's where the tactical nightmare really kicks in. Administrative level network control means the T-5000 doesn't command Terminators the way a general commands soldiers. It owns them. Every T-3000 unit, every connected machine within range is a direct extension of its will. It can override their programming with a thought. Your reprogrammed protector unit, worthless the moment the T-5000 gets close enough, but the capability that separates it from everything below is temporal displacement field generation. The T-5000 doesn't just travel through time, it actively generates the fields that make time travel possible. It's not a passenger in the timeline, it's an architect, and destroying it borders on theoretical. Near complete disintegration is recoverable. Yeah, the only confirmed methods require sustained electromagnetic pulse exposure or total nanomachine dispersal, neither of which the human resistance can realistically achieve. Here's the thing though, the scariest part isn't the specs, it's what the T-5000 represents. Skynet spent decades hiding behind its creations, sending infiltrators to do its work. The T-5000 is the moment it stopped hiding. It looked at humanity and decided the war deserved its personal attention. That's not a machine versus human conflict anymore. That's a god stepping onto the battlefield. But even a god has something above it on this list, and what's sitting at number 1 makes the T-5000 look like a prototype. T-1000. Before we get into this one, let's be honest about something. The T-1000, sometimes called the T-Meg, has essentially zero confirmed canonical status. It doesn't appear in any primary Terminator film. Its specifications live in fan wikis, speculative Skynet timelines, and extended universe materials that nobody at the studio has officially signed off on. That matters, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But here's the thing, the concept is so terrifyingly logical that it deserves the top spot anyway. Every single model on this list was built to solve a problem. The T-800 couldn't shapeshift, so Skynet created the T-1000. The T-1000 couldn't split into independent units, so the Rev-9 addressed that. The T-3000 proved humans themselves could become the weapon. The T-5000 turned Skynet's consciousness into a walking body. The T-Meg takes every one of those ideas and asks a simple question: why stop at one body? This isn't a Terminator with a hive mind, it's a hive mind that decided to become a Terminator. Distributed nanomachine consciousness existing across multiple physical forms simultaneously, each one fully operational, each one aware of what every other node is doing. Destroy one body and you've accomplished literally nothing. The network doesn't even flinch. The intelligence persists across every remaining instantiation, like you swatted a single mosquito and expected the swarm to care. And that's what makes the T-Meg genuinely unsettling on a philosophical level. Conventional termination becomes a meaningless concept. You can't kill something that doesn't exist in any single location. Permanently neutralizing it would require simultaneously destroying every component of the distributed system across every physical form it occupies. The Resistance has no technology capable of that. Nobody does. It's not a tactical problem, it's a logical impossibility. The T-Meg isn't a weapon, it isn't an infiltrator, it isn't even an army. It's a persistent, unkillable intelligence that has simply decided to take physical form wherever and whenever it wants to. Now zoom out for a second. This ranking started with the T-800 because every design above it was Skynet's answer to something the T-800 couldn't do. Faster regeneration, better infiltration, dual form combat, human assimilation, physical godhood. And the T-1000 is the answer to a question Skynet never stopped asking. What would it take to build something that simply cannot be stopped? The answer apparently is to stop building Terminators and start becoming one. Whether that concept ever gets real canonical confirmation might be the single most interesting unresolved question in the entire franchise. So where do you think the series should go from here? Back to the grounded practical horror of a T-800 kicking down your door, or forward into the kind of conceptual nightmare the T-Meg represents? Because personally, I think there's room for both. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.